slide here, Steve. The outline today, basically we're going to talk about the cell and the history behind the cell, the design, talk some tech specs, talk some RG and differential, cover stock design, and some of the mentality and the theories behind the cover stock. And then we'll go to some testing with the PBA players. We have some really good video footage today you guys are going to see from Brian LeClaire, Brian Kretzer, and some commentary by Chris Schlemmer and Chris Sand about the cell. It was tested out on the PBA Tour, and after that too, you're going to get some footage today on the Storm side as well from Pete Weber, Norm Duke, and Chris Schlemmer too. The biggest thing with this, and we'll talk a little bit about asymmetrical drilling instructions, and we'll talk about the Pluto, and then we'll talk a little bit about the reaction guides and how this ball fits into the matrix within Roto Grip. But as we move forward here, now the concept of the cell started a couple of years ago for me. It actually started when I was at a sales meeting for Storm, and like you guys sit here today, and you'll be sitting there and you have a pad of paper in front of you, and maybe one of you two will doodle or something, but I started to scratch an idea on a piece of paper. And from there it blossomed into, we built it into a CAD drawing. And after about a year of working on a CAD and building it into technology, it's in the ball we have in front of us today. But the original idea was, we basically want to take an asymmetrical part, a symmetrical basic shape, and then we wanted to take, and I wanted to cut facets out of that design. So when we cut facets out of this design, basically we're taking pieces out and trying to give us enough asymmetry that we create a strong mass bias ball. We create a distinctive preferred spin axis. So in this technology, but the thing that we always see in all of us as pro shop drillers, and we've been drilling for a long time, many of you have been doing a long time, we see more continuation or more roll through the Pindex a lot of times out of symmetrical balls versus asymmetrical balls. Asymmetrical balls are the newest technology, and by far have the most ability to adjust breakpoints with an asymmetrical ball. But sometimes we get a little bit of a very distinct breakpoint position, or we get a very distinct roll pattern that sometimes when the shot goes away from it, we have to put it away. So I wanted to kind of try to combine the theories of asymmetry, where we can fine-tune moving that mass bias around. Also, though, in the fact of, let's take a symmetrical ball where it's still a little bit forgiving with the drilling, but also a little bit more forgiving to the bowler. So we give them a little bit more area at their target. We give them a little bit more forgiveness off the friction, and a little bit more hook in the oil. Now, it's a different theory or different concept. There's been some others in the industry that have had some balls that were symmetrical, asymmetrical, I guess you could call it, where it starts out as an overall symmetrical piece, and then we pull mass away to create an asymmetrical product. But I'm not trying to do what they do. I have a theory in my head also, too, about a ball that maintains its differential. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So that was my intent behind the design. More continuous motion, but with the tunability of an asymmetrical design. So if we go to the next slide. So what we came up with, we have the nucleus core. So RG numbers 252. So a lower RG, not too low, but on probably the high side of the low spectrum. A differential of about 56, and then an intermediate differential of 18. So now those of you who, I think everybody in this room understands asymmetry, and I'll explain it to you real quickly. The axis that goes through the pin, straight through, basically much like the North and South Pole on the Earth. Let's think of it as this is the Earth here. So the x-axis is the North-South Pole. Okay? Now the y-axis, we see the CG and the mass bias. The y-axis is like the equator. It comes through 90 degrees to the x-axis. So the length on the RG, on the x-axis, 252. The length, what we do in RG swing based off of the formula, the length on the y-axis, 2.576. So XY, so 576. So that creates our differential. The difference between the length versus width of those two is overall differential. Now the secondary, or the third factor, I should say, not secondary, the third factor is the axis that comes through at 90 degrees to the Y. This is the Z-axis. Now the Z-axis, the difference between a symmetrical and asymmetrical ball is there is more than a 10 difference between the y-axis and the z-axis. Okay? So if we look at it from this direction, we can see the narrowness here, but if we look at it here, it's the total overall thickness there. So what we get is an asymmetrical part. We create that x, y, and z. So the difference in an asymmetrical is we create a greater difference of 10 between the y and the z-axis. But what's unique about this product too is many of you have seen in the last couple of years there's a product on the market called a determinator. Now, I don't know if anybody in the room has a determinator. Nobody has a determinator. Actually, it's a very good product to have. What a determinator is, it's a free spin machine. So what it is when you place the ball onto the rollers and turn it on, what it does is it free spins it, and what it does is it gets its axes to line up so that basically what we get is that the x-axis is tumbling end over end in relation to the y and the z-axis. So it always locates the y-axis or the strong preferred spin axis. It's a nice machine to have that when you're drilling balls,